Talking about some of his family and friends, and I was starting to think about the idea that I know a lot about you, and that if it wasn't for James, first of all, you wouldn't even be here, right? So that's number one. If you were going to Jerusalem, you'd be a palmist, and if you were going to Rome, you would be a wanderer. So the fact that James is an important part of your life. The other thing I know about you is, like me probably, you're here because you're curious. And that's a really unique human trait. The idea of curiosity, of wanting to know. See, because what Paula doesn't know or hasn't said about me is, A, I'm left-handed, B, I'm hyperactive, and C, I was educated by nuns and priests my whole life. So there's nothing you can do to me. I've been in trouble a lot. So that's my thing. The last thing I need to know about you is I would like you to all have your teaching finger or your directional finger. Would you put it up in the air, please? Would you all, at the count of three, please point north? 1, 2, 3, point. Okay, so that's why some of you are on the Camino longer than others, finding direction. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a direction, and but I have to set the tone because I just can't go into art. I have no theology degree, and I'm not an art history degree person. I wrote for children most of my life. So what I have here is your first piece of real Camino art. And it dates from 1957. It's my artwork from second grade. And that's what it looks like. And some of you may have colored things just like it or got it from your grandchildren, put it on the refrigerator. And the reason I have to put that up is because everything that I've learned about St. James or the art or the Camino is based upon the idea of that time, of what was going on. And so when I look at this, I grew up in Detroit. My whole neighborhood was nothing but Polish and Ukrainian. So I'm a product of that. When I color that picture, I'm sure I know what crayons I use because my country, my family, and my church directed me in a certain direction. So I know what that artwork was like. And when we look at art, as we move forward in the presentation, we have to have that same mindset. Here's another one, and I won't call me a turkey, but a couple of years ago, one of my grandchildren got a task from school, and the task was Thanksgiving's coming. And what we'd like you to do is, how will you hide your turkey so the turkey's not eaten? So this is what my grandchild did. He made a Camino turkey and sent the turkey to Santiago so he wouldn't be eaten for Thanksgiving. So I thought that's a pretty good cultural piece also that we deal with. So this is your wall in your house. And if I came to your house, I can guarantee you that I would go and I would ask you, who's in that picture? And how come you're wearing those clothes, right? Because I want to know, and you have cultural artifacts in your house. It is your artwork, it's your photography, your photo albums that you show to your grandchildren. I have a photo album in my car right now. There's people in there, I don't even know who they are anymore. Because it's just stories that were told to me by my parents. So that middle picture, I'll tell you mine is the last slide of my presentation. I have 15,000 slides because of doing 9 Caminos, and only one will be in this presentation, so you ought to be happy about that. Cultural memories. So as we walk and do the Camino or go anywhere to anyone's homes, when we look at photos, when we look at artwork, we have to remember it is a product of that time. And that's what we have to deal with. And so art is pretty amazing, that creative process that you have. But again, think about the values that come in art. And think about the beliefs that are behind what it is done. And especially what you know, and you've heard about James and the Camino here, because I may show you some pictures that look a little bit different. Because I'm going to take you on the family reunion of St. James. You ready for this? There's St. James in the year 30. I can't find a single photograph of James. Not one. And I know people here are theologians and written books, but I've looked at thousands of pictures, I think, and I have not found a picture of St. James. And I give you a reason. But this is a composite. Looks a little different than all the church ones I see, or in art shows, or at the Prado. But this would be a composite, in my estimation, of what James might have looked like. Because we have to remember, culturally, where is he from? You know, he's Middle Eastern. He has, generally, at that time, you had short, scruffy hair. You would have had a beard. Your clothing would be very simple, right? Your hair would be brown to dark brown, deep brown eyes, olive brown skin, and your average height would be about 5'5". And we know that from all these archaeological remains that we can find. So this is my new James for you. This is a different picture, and that's why I have a photo album here. It's not the James that I think about all the time. Then personally, I was raised Catholic, and when I started thinking of James, I had to go back to the original source, and I know other people have talked about this. But, you know, essentially for this pilgrim, it's 17 times you find him in the Gospel. You find him 4 times where the 2 of them are called the Zebedee. And then James, John, and Peter are 3 times. And when James is beheaded, he's all by himself. Everybody knows. That's it. You know, so I'm walking the Camino, and that's what I got in the Gospels. Then I had to do more research because I have this inquiry thing. I want to know, curiosity. And so, James, what about it? Well, it's a pretty common name. And it's an appropriate name for James, don't you think? Follower, supplanter. And this morning somebody had mentioned about the names of James. In reality, I found that there's 91 times in the New Testament that James is mentioned. So pick one. Then also I discovered is that even today, as well as the time of James's life, James is a common name. Actually, it's in the top 10 in all the lists. So there you go. James is a common name. But back to the cultural, historical, and religious background. My first Camino, I was clouded in what I thought everything was all about and what I was going to experience. And it wasn't until I understood your family, and I looked at your clothing, and I looked at the Jewish people and the Muslims and the Christians, that some of the pictures start coming into play, because it wasn't just a bunch of Catholics walking across, right? Matter of fact, you know, he wasn't even Catholic. And so I had to go back and I have to think about what about other art, other issues with it. And we have, and I've gone back and I have to read the Quran now and the Surah, and I have to go back to the Old Testament, and I have to go back to the Christian background. All 3 of them have to be included when we start looking at art. But the dilemma we have is because of the religion and the laws and regulation. You know, for Catholics, or at least in the New Testament, there's 1,050 rules. In the Jewish book, it's 613, and in the Muslim, it's 500. So pick one. But in the Hebrew Bible, there's no graven images, right? It's in the book, and so there is no James because there was no art. And in the Quran, it's strictly forbidden also. So when you're walking, you don't have 2 of those groups that were in Spain. I'm still building a picture for everybody here. Oop, there we go. But this is where James is from. I kind of like that. You know, where are you from?
North Carolina.
North Carolina. Where are you from?
Alexandria, Virginia.
Yeah, see, so it's a map. It's a place, right? And James is from over here, and this is where they think, this is Bethesda, and that's what it looks like today, and that's where they think Andrew and Paul are from. And this is Capernaum, what it looks like today. And that's probably where James and Zebedee and his brother were from, just the general area. So we're not dealing with high-rise apartments and glorious temples and things like that when we start thinking about it. As a matter of fact, this is the earliest photograph I have of James. Remember? Come on, you got to smile a little bit. But this is it. This is James. And again, the culture and what we get from it. This is James. Obviously, we know it's James, right? He's got his staff. I wish he had a diaper on, maybe, I don't know. This is his brother. We know it's his brother because he's got the chalice in his hand. But what's really obvious about this is like it's Roman in his background. Zebedee's wearing furs. This guy's a fisherman. I live in Michigan. Do you know what the average fisherman looks like on Lake Erie? It's not wearing jewels and caps and things like that. And so it's an interesting idea of that. Who said this is what Zebedee and Salome and James and John look like? And this is actually where they think that James's father came from one of the 12 tribes of Israel. So there we go. Here's another family picture. I better speed it up because I'm going to go through a lot of these. And again, it's one of those rare photographs where a grandpa's even in it. That's Salome's father. There's Zebedee. We know this is James over here because it says so in its halo. And over here is John, and it says so in his halo. And then we also know because in the Bible it talks about the eagle in delivering a message, because that's what John does also. It's kind of interesting because as far as I can find out, James is born around 4 CE, and John is born somewhere between 5 and 10 CE. So even when you look at pictures and you look at the age difference in it, it's kind of telling. Here's what else I found out. You know, this is it. There are no teenage pictures of James and John in Bethesda. There's only ruins of everything. So we know he spoke Aramaic. He probably had an accent because of where he's at. He spoke a little Hebrew because he went to temple. Remember, he's Jewish. And, I was raised Catholic. And when my father said you go to church on Sunday, we went to church on Sunday. So I suspect John and James were no different with Dad. Because parents were esteemed, honor thy father and mother. He probably played jacks and he ate a lot of plant-based material because that's what you had growing up in that area. Again, here it is. We're all going to do a photo later on of the group. This is the best family picture of James that exists. This is very German. It's, Protestant Reformation, and there's all kind of other stories. But everybody in here just about is a saint. And if you're desperate, I can tell you all their names, but I see you're not desperate. But this is Mary, and it's interesting. That's Joseph, that's Mary, that's Mary's mother Anne, that's Jesus. This is Anne. This is her 3 husbands. So Mary Salome is born, Mary, the Virgin Mary, that's her father there. And then this is Mary Salome, the mother of James and John. That's James and that's John. That's Zebedee. And that's their father. And this is Alphaeus and Cleophas, Mary again. This is James the Less, suckling. Bartholomew, Simon, and somebody else. They're all saints. But it's a great family picture, and it was a very traditional kind of thing to do with the background and history and all of that. Anyway, so a great family picture. So then I started thinking at home. I walked across my first Camino, and I didn't think about the idea that, what does the artwork say about James? Now, I've been dealing with James and his family and growing up and, being a fisherman and all that. But this is then James the Apostle. We have lots of those pictures. This is Orthodox, and it's meant to be of the spirit and not of the emotion. This is Dur, And that's James. He doesn't, James dies at the age of, 46, something like that. He looks pretty ragged there. Why did Durer do that? Why did he put that? And then this one over here, Salvador Dali, probably the most famous Dali work that exists. It's in Canada. It's 14 feet high. It's thought by most people to be the best piece of Dali in terms of showing. And instead of James with a sword in his hand, right, because I got to get this, he's a pilgrim and he's a warrior. That's the three things I have to keep in mind of what makes James unique. And in this picture, he does not have a sword in his hand. He's holding Christ in the crucifix. Also the background is he was into nuclear energy and the nuclear bomb. And this is also the national flower, which is my mother's favorite flower, gardenia. There's so much behind it that you don't realize when you start dealing with art. Let's go on with that. What else do we know about James? Well, we got this one. So I know James was fishing at night because they were cleaning the nets. And if you were a fisherman on the Sea of Galilee, every day when you came in, you had to clean the nets to repair them because they were your livelihood. And then we know this idea that they left their boats. And they have this picture. And in my way of thinking, every Father's Day card ought to have Zabidi on the front cover. I mean, this is a family operation. He's not wealthy. His kids work for him, and Peter works for him, and Andrew works for him, and all that. And somebody shows up at the seaside and says, I want your kids to go with me for the next 3 years. And he says, okay. That's pretty amazing. I mean, there he is. I mean, think about it. I think about your children when you were dating, right? Somebody showed up, I want your daughter, or, they weren't happy. So anyway, there's James, there's John. John is younger. There's Peter, and there's Andrew. I showed this to a Lutheran minister as I was doing pictures, and then the first thing he picked up was Andrew. Because he says, notice Andrew's a different color than everybody else. Because he looks like you ought to be a Jew growing up in Palestine area. Anyway, just interesting reflection in art and what it tells you. Anyway, there we go. I had to put Salome because you got to see the family. I love this picture. And if you don't know, James's mother, you all walk the Camino, but maybe you don't know anything about Mom. Mary Salome. She took Mary because of Mary. She wasn't born Mary Salome. She took the name of Mary. And this is at the crucifixion of Christ. And all I can see is this emotion. This is the woman that I would want to talk to at a Camino meeting, right? What's wrong? What's happening? What happened? And it's just what a wonderful piece of art to let me feel what James's mother might have been like in that photo. And there are some names. Shalom, salam, is the same meaning as saying the word Salome. And so I had to give, and that means peace. We need a little bit more of that running around. There we go. Let's see what else we got. Yeah, so I want to go back again. Fishing. Tough work. Think about it. Your father fished, you fished. My dad worked 30 years at GM. That's where I was supposed to go. So didn't work out. So fishing. So here's another great piece that many of you have seen probably in the past. This is painted by Rembrandt, and it's the only painting Rembrandt ever did with the water scene. And there's 14 people in the boat. And let's see, Jesus and 12 apostles. The 14th one is Rembrandt's in there. And also this painting was in the museum in New York City, and it was stolen in 1990, and it's never been recovered. So that's what it is. And this is what you're fishing for. This is actually a mosaic from Capernaum, and that's what they would have fished for, mushi. That's what the fish looks like, and if you spend time in Spain, everything comes with French fries. So there we go. Just a quick thing. When did these paintings start up? Well, it wasn't until we had the tombs in Rome, in large part. And this is the apostles. from the 3rd century, and nobody had long hair and nobody had beards. Everyone looked like a Roman, right? And here's one from Croatia. There's James, there's John, there's Peter. There's all the apostles. Nobody has long hair. And so that's a whole other issue. And so these are just some early pieces. Here's a wonderful piece of Greek Orthodox painting, and I call this, "Where's Waldo?" You know, where's James in that picture? And because everyone's looking, this is the family picture again. Here we are, we're all together. You know, it's my birthday type of thing. Anybody find James? Well, this is James, and this is John. And the only reason I know that is James is the first one to die. John is the last one to die. So he's older. I'm sorry, this is Peter. I apologize. This is John over here because he dies at the year 100 at the age of 94, having a long life. And so that's it. This is Paul, by the way. And so it's kind of interesting, again, when you start looking at why are these people named the way they are. So there we go for that one. Here's another one. Very traditional. If you've ever gone to a Mass or a wake at a Greek Orthodox church or Russian Orthodox church, it's meant not to be devoted on. It's meant to be a spirit, a spiritual aspect of the being. So that's James. There's another James. You don't see him with seashells and shells, and you don't see him with stuff. That's a Catholic thing, I guess, or a Christian thing. Here's another one. This is one of those rare ones where you have him in that. That's his brother. That's James, Saint. Anyway, and that's, I forgot, Saint somebody or another. There we go. There we go. There are a lot of saints. I counted them in Spain. It's like there's over 100 of them in Spain. Here's another one. So this is stuff that was talked about earlier today. So, you know, there's John. There's Peter, there's James, and again, the background is very Greek, very Roman. Certainly is not Capernaum, where probably Peter was from. So that's, oh, and you also notice the colors, because this is yellow. Easter's coming up, and it's a common color within the Christian church. It means rebirth. So think of what's going on in there. Whoever painted this knew about traditions and even how to use color. Here's another one. Same thing, the use of color. And one of the special events that makes James. This was mentioned earlier, the best helicopter mom. There's Salome over there again. Look how young the boys are, her children. Great family photo. And here you got this guy saying, "What's the deal?" Right? You know, you just got this attitude like, what do you mean bringing these two kids here? And by the way, this is orange, and if you didn't know it, the name orange didn't come till the 15th century. It was called red yellow, and if you've been, I've been to Nepal and places, the common robes of the religious people are the oranges, and so we don't have that much in ours. So there he is, the helicopter mom. And then, of course, we have El Greco, famous works of art that he has done. Jesus, there are the three, James, John, and Peter. The rest of the apostles coming up in the garden. And just in case you were wondering, that's James and that's John. And if you read the Da Vinci Code, that's not Mary Magdalene. Okay? And if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's a big conspiracy that they think that's Mary Magdalene. But in many paintings, John is shown as like a cross between a male and female. And it's a very common element, and I've seen it in a lot of paintings, and it's true of Leonardo and his work. Raphael, but another famous one that we have on the Transfiguration. There's two things going on here. That's James, that's John, that's Peter, the Transfiguration, and then a miracle is occurring down here for the other apostles. And then Pentecost, this was, you saw this morning, you know, how do they get out? This is the only picture I have of anything that I'm going to talk about with James. I don't know where he went to Spain. Other people do. I did go, I was in Santiago, I was in Zaragoza, Zamora. I'll get them straight. In September, and I had to go here because this is the only place that it ever happened that Mary, while she was still alive, appears to James, is on the Ebro River. James is despondent, and he's with his 7 apostles, and Mary appears to him and gives him a piece of the alabaster that Jesus was beaten on when he was whipped. And she says, I want you to build my church here. And he does. He leaves a couple of... And if you've not been there, it's incredible. The largest square in the world is in front of the cathedral in Zaragoza. And because I do origami, you also should know the largest origami museum in the world is in that town. So there, go visit that. But it's pretty phenomenal, the story. And if you go in there, you can see where the hands have rubbed away at the walls. You also will see the 2 bombs that went through the roof of the cathedral and never exploded. They're on the wall too. This is kind of interesting. Again, you look at the paintings. We have a cross here. In case you're counting, all 7 apostles are here with James and Mary and the pillar. And over here is kind of interesting because it's the Order of Santiago, which doesn't happen for several hundred more years. But there he is. So there he is. And I put that on there. Here's one of those little known things. How we doing? I'm doing fine. Thank you. Is that Pilar. And if you've read these books, and if you watch the movie, there she is. And if you watch the movie and read the book, she's one tough old bird, right? She's the foundation, Pilar. And so back to Zaragoza again, Our Lady of the Pillar, or Pilar, and which is the most common name of women in Spain, is Pilar. And so pillar is strength, Pilar is strength, and also the idea that it's spelled as a male and not as a female ending. And because again, it represents strength. I think that's kind of cool. So I have 3 daughters, and so I have to make sure I get all the women licks, and that's what I have. So that's it, Pilar. I'm just going to do this quickly because I'll go to other stuff. What a great painting, isn't it? But again, go back to what I told you about James. He's in a fishing village in the middle of nowhere, and here he is. He's now a pilgrim. Wow. He's got the book. He's got everything. Rembrandt painted him. That's a self-portrait of Rembrandt. You see some similarities in the colors and the hues and the chiaroscuro. What a strong face on this man at this point. And look at this one. This is by an Italian. Do you think he looks Italian? So depending on what country you go to, James can look a lot of different ways. This is from a German altar piece. It's also my cover for my cell phone. But anyway, you can get anything nowadays. So Peter Paul Rubens, again, notice the reds that are used an awful lot in this. And this one is just pretty angelic. And very simple, very clean. By the way, you see the green on? Green means rebirth when you're using color. I'd like you all to do me a favor for a second. Would everybody please stand up? Stand up. There we go. Shake your hands all about. Now sit down. Thank you. I just want to make sure you're still awake. This morning, somebody asked about the shells. I have other opinions on shells and things. Let's see. Get rid of Greco here for a second. Oops. Did I go the wrong way? Oh, there. First of all, in some of the things that I've read, at least within the Catholic faith, the 3 shells represent also faith, hope, and charity. So I'll throw that out, and I could be totally wrong, and somebody will tell me tonight. The other thing I always find interesting about James and the shell, I get it, I know all about the other shells, is that, it's not kosher to eat scallops, right? So if you don't know what I'm talking about, you have to go back and read the New Testament If it doesn't have fins and it doesn't have scales, you're not supposed to eat it. So I find it kind of remarkable that James got scallop shells all over, and if he's keeping kosher, he shouldn't be eating it anyway, right? So there. So anybody here Jewish can help me out with that. El Greco, when he painted James, he actually, his model for all these were inmates in sanitariums. There you go. So if they look a little strange to you, he did that on purpose. And that's where he got as many of his models from. This is, remember I said friends and family? There's James, there's his John. And again, you can see the feminine aspects of John in many paintings. And you'll either see him in two ways. You'll see him as a young person, because he was the youngest apostle, and he was the last apostle to die, so you'll see him as an old person. So in most paintings that you'll see, also you'll see the snakes coming out of the chalice because they were trying to poison him, and a miracle happened and he wasn't poisoned. So that's that. Now this is, I can't tell you how many times I've been in a church and I'll go to a pilgrim and I'll think, that's not James, you know. And they'll look at me like I'm crazy because they see the hat and the stick and the shells. And if you've ever walked Via de la Plata, you don't even know you're going to Santiago because you don't even see a statue of St. James for the first 200 miles, I think. But you do see him all along the way. And he's a great story, and I don't have time, so catch me at dinner and I'll tell you. Not St. James, that's St. Roche, or St. Roch, whatever you want to call it. But in all of the churches, and I see as many pictures of him in churches as I do of St. James, he always will be pointing to his leg, and he'll always have a dog, generally a greyhound with a loaf of bread in his mouth. And if you're looking for a leftover saint to help you out, you probably want to use him because he's the patron saint of everything. Anyway, but there's a long, great story behind it. So, but he likes St. James. Obviously, he's dressed like it, just like we do. And then you know about this book in St. James. But maybe this one you don't know. And actually, in the back, I have a 3-page bibliography of books that nobody reads back there. And this is one of them. But this book was next to the Bible in the end of the 13th century. It was the most highly read book that you could get. And many painters and many philosophers and theologians, they refer to this book, The Golden Legend. And if you want St. James the Greater, get volume 2 and not 1, because he's the first chapter. But this is a really important book about all of this. And then the last one, of course, of this category, you know, is when, just before he gets beheaded, and he's obviously letting Hermogenes over here, and he cures somebody over here, and see this guy over there? He doesn't look like anybody else because he's the painter. I don't know, painters always like to stick themselves in there for some reason. And then, of course, James then gets beheaded, and actually this is a real tomb of a pilgrim in England. And so I think that's what's going to happen to me. And they know because they find shells in some of the tombs that they dig up. You know, so there's none of you are surprised about this picture, or I thought it would surprise somebody. And somebody mentioned this today. Who's got all the body parts? I don't know. There's a lot of body parts of James running around. I found several different references for him. And the miracles continue on. Oh, this is one of his friends. This was mentioned earlier. You know, you got to have good friends in high places. Saint Isidore. I mean, I don't know about your family, but he has a sister who becomes a saint, 2 brothers who become saints. And he's probably the most prolific writer of Spain that ever existed. He spent 20 years writing volumes of everything. And he wrote about James, but he never said James came to Spain. That's according to the things I read. And that's Isidore. And he's actually the patron saint of the internet now. Ta-da! See, curiosity killed the cat. You probably didn't want to know that. Other little dumb things that I find out about James is, you know, wow, there's a lot of places named St. James, and somebody may come from one of those. And Santiago is all over the place. And, you know, and then I can't believe there's 20 places named Matamoros, you know, when you think Morse later, wow. And then there's 5 churches that have parts and pieces, and then there's clothing stores in France if you want to go shopping. I could not find a candy bar, so if you're looking to make your millions, you know, come up with some candy bar that has almonds in it, and whatever else you need to have. Anyway, so, ta-da, here we go. This is great. If you don't know this woman that was mentioned, let me read to you a short paragraph. I'm amazed. This is like a big deal. Why is James the patron saint? Look at this lady's credentials. All right, here we go. Let's see. She was born in Spain, raised in Spain, founded convents in Spain, wrote in Spain. God communicated with her in Spain. She lived always in Spain, never left Spain, died in Spain, left her body to Spain. Spain beatified her and canonized her as a co-saint. Wow, that's big on my pick, you know. It's just, so I'm amazed. And it's a wonderful book, Satan Nation. There's huge volumes of information about the political intrigue between the politics of Spain and the religion of Spain, and all of this about St. Teresa and St. James, and all of that takes place. So curiosity, you have to go find it. Anybody been to Rosavalles? You know about, come on, there we go. I mean, I didn't realize the first time I went to Rosavalles that the Roland statue is there, his sword is there, and his horse is there. And if you don't know, this is like epic stuff. Like, this is painful when you were in the university and somebody made you read this stuff. Song of Roland, Chanson de Roland, Orlando Furioso. But I discovered that there's like a Spanish counterpart, because these two books, it's the French that win, and they kill off, you know, the other side. In this one, and I have the book in my room to prove it, is actually a Spanish nobleman who saves the country from the French at Rosavalles. And it's a great read, great story. Anyway, so and there's actually lectures given about him, and that may be what he looked like. And anyway, so there. God, a whole different twist. This is the first woman to ever walk the Camino. I thought I would just let you know, and that was a long time ago. Let's see what else. Oh, this is another person you got to know, and you love this line. Not many people know. Yeah, and she cried a lot. This woman was phenomenal. She came from a fairly wealthy family in England. She got married to a pretty well-off guy. She ends up having children from the age of 20 to the age of 60. She has like 14 of them. She starts her own brewery business. Not only that, she walks the Camino, she walks to Rome, and she walks to Jerusalem. I'm feeling like I'm slacking here, folks, you know. And she's got it's a great story. This is her book. And she writes this all down. And then we have, burning, raping, and pillaging of monasteries, and it's hidden. And it wasn't until like in the 1940s or 50s, these wealthy people in this house were playing ping pong, and the ball falls into a cupboard, and they go and try to find the ball, and they discover her manuscript. Amazing, and that's her, walking the Camino. And this is like 1400s. Women didn't do this stuff. And it's Marjorie Kemp. And you have to read about this one. I mean, think about it. She has 14 kids between 20 and 60, walks 3 Caminos and starts a beer garden. Incredible. Wow. And then you got all the legends and all the art that goes with legends. And it continues on. You all know these. This being the biggest one, a battle that never happens. I mean, nobody told me this stuff is made up sometimes. Because it's good, and I understand why it's done at times. How about this one? That's St. James, Matamoros, but it's not in Spain. This is in Mexico. And you'll find him in Mexico. And how about this one? This was in Ecuador. And what I discovered, well, let's go on. How about this one? This one's from New Mexico in the United States. And it's painted on wood. And if you didn't know, this is another piece of trivia. I'm fascinated by what happened to all the Jews of Spain, the Sephardic Jews. How in the world did everybody get from Barcelona to New Mexico? And they do. Matter of fact, somebody's here. Who's here from New Mexico? Raise your hand. Thank you. But I've attended some of the lectures that are given at the University of New Mexico, because they have an in-depth study of everybody in Texas, New Mexico, and Mexico that is actually a Sephardic Jew. And it's one of the leading centers is in Mexico, New Mexico. How about this one? Go to Haiti. This is voodoo. And St. James is big there. And you can go on YouTube and you can type this in and you'll hear voodoo music done in Haiti and about St. James. How about that? That's something different. And also I discovered that there is a society of priests at Santiago in Haiti. And this was an initiation of a new Catholic priest, but priests from all over the world volunteered to go to Haiti for 2 or 3 years. And they're called, again, that idea of pilgrimage, that they're called the priests of Santiago. That's pretty neat. And we even have Diego Rivera. Look at the statue again. And so James made it around. This one's probably one of the rarest ones I found in terms of paintings. Because there's James in the background, right, on his horse. There's the cross. But if you know what it means to be a Knights Templar, not Knights Templar, Knights of Santiago, you have to have heritage going back many generations. And so what we have here then is somebody that is made a knight. Oops. He's made a knight, and a fancy knight because he has a white gown, but he's not Spanish. And he doesn't come from a long legacy of people. This is pretty cool because I told you I'm Polish, and you're wondering what's this got to do with Poland? Is that this is the flag, Scandinavian flag, and what you have here is Finland, Scotland, and what's the other one that's there? Norway, and this is a part of Poland. And you're going like, hey, wait a minute, what's Poland doing? And we got Santiago going. So the good Polak that I might find a reason, and I did. These are family coat of arms, right? And they all have the shell in them. But they're all from Poland. And given what's going on in the world today, I didn't plan this, right? I found these months ago, and especially what Poland is doing now to be that pilgrim, warrior, helper, spirit. Anyway, that's the end of my lecture for that. How about this one? Look at that, all the swords. And there are the shells. This is the kit. You won't believe this one. This is King Alfonso I. No. King Alfonso I from the Congo. Wait a minute. What's going on here? See, that's why I'm saying there's, like, nobody told me this stuff exists. It's just this curiosity, this kid, that went to, anyway. Yeah. And this one is in Delhi. And this is a church that's named St. James. And the guy that built it, his name was James. And he was in a battle in India, and he created a church in commemoration of James and all the paintings. Then you got the Knights of the Brotherhood, the Santiago, all these other things going on. I don't know if you know this or not, but that's the current king's brother. And he was shot and killed on Good Friday. Did you all know that? And nobody knows how he got shot and killed. You know how he got? But he has the symbol of the Brotherhood of Santiago. Anyway. You know, this painting is so famous. Anybody went to college, you had to learn that painting. And what you don't know is that he has the symbol of Santiago, the Order of Santiago. But it was painted on the painting 4 years after he was dead. So things happen that you don't expect. Actually, they think the king painted it because he was a good buddy and all this. You can even buy action figures of Santiago. See, aren't you glad you came today? Because you just knew there has to be action figures given Marvel Entertainment. But yeah, there's all these military things that go on. And then there's just modern art that seems to be much more reflective of that attitude of openness and things like that. Well, I love this line, and I have to give you one story, because earlier in the presentation I asked you who was in the picture on your wall. So I have one to give to you as my final story right now. And it's this picture. And as Paula told you earlier, I actually met my wife backpacking in Canada 46 years ago. And we hiked a lot. And on our first Camino together, halfway through we were walking to dinner and she tripped and broke her arm, where she almost passed out. And somehow we got a cab, we got her to the hospital. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, we had to make a decision. And that was, does she go home and do I go with her? See, I'm getting choked up now. And it was decided over some tears that it was important for me to finish. I had to go on. And for me, it was the hardest thing in my life, because in some of you that have lost spouses and things, it was the first time in my life I've ever hiked that distance without my wife. And so what she did is she gave me her wedding ring. And when I got to Finisterre, I put the wedding rings there and I took the picture. So every time I walk the Camino, every time I see that image of the sea in Finisterre, I think of the spirit of my wife, of being able to let me go and finish what I needed to do on that day. The spirit of the Camino in those two rings are on my wall and my picture. Thank you.